around grade 11 or 12 when I had to start making real life decisions. And at that point, I was doing community theater and theater class, drama class in high school. It was like 15 hours a week. Okay. And that's a lot of theater.
Yeah,
And
it
it's
is.
because that's what I loved to do. But that was the age when I had to decide, was I going to keep doing it or was I going to study something else? And ultimately, I decided that I wouldn't keep doing it. And the reason I made that decision was because I decided that I wasn't good enough. Welcome to WOMMcast. I'm one of your hosts of the show, PÉZO the Poet. My quest this season is to sell one of my framed photographs for $10 million and share every part of the learning process with all of you.
I'm your other host, Sarah Faye. Wait, did you just say you're selling a photo for $10 million?
Yep.
How can I help?
How about co-hosting the podcast?
It's on.
All right, here we go. On today's episode, we will reveal how I decided that I'm going to sell a framed photograph for $10 million. How the two of us wound up hosting this podcast together, and the origin story of WOMM.
What the heck is WOMM?
Well, you'll find out, won't you? Da-na-na-na-na-na. All right, Sarah, so here we go. I'm sure everybody listening wants to know how the two of us met. Are you muted?
No. I have a cat that's been like hitting my printer. That cat I told you about. Oh, he's a special one.
Tell us about your cat.
His name is Bihan, and he will jump on the chair before I try to get to it and climb all over everything. And it's I was worried about him, and he's been doing everything I was worried about. So anyways, how I met you was pretty interesting. I found you on Facebook. Initially, you were spinning in a chair talking about something inspirational, and then eventually I spotted you making a great proclamation about selling a $10 million photograph, and I was like, whoa, all right, like, what's this about? And that's when I reached out to you, and I wanted to help.
I was like, okay, like, who's this person who keeps sharing my posts? I feel like I started noticing that you were just sharing all of my posts, and like, I'll be honest, nobody like ever shares any of my posts. So I was like, why is this person sharing all my posts? Like, why were you sharing all my posts?
There's a lot of people who post things that are just like, average and maybe uninspirational, and things that you said really connected with me. And also the fact that you were doing something very bold and a little more than like anybody in my social network. So I was like, all right.
Yeah, I think what I ended up realizing and learning over time it's been like, I don't know, like a year and a half that we've been like chatting and working together in different ways. And what I've noticed is that, unlike most of the people on social media, we're both like up to these like really larger than life things.
Definitely. Yeah. I have quite a big goal ahead of me too. I want to make social change, and what you were talking about, it felt like to me, was you wanted to make social change too, and that was exciting to me.
Like, what kind of changes do you want to see in the world?
I want the world to be just a little better place for everybody, where they can meet their inevitable human needs. And I want to do that in a way that brings, I don't know, fulfillment to people's lives and to help them achieve their goals.
Is there like a reason why you give a shit about that?
Yeah, I I don't know. There's just a lot of people that are experiencing individualism, and I found that I wanted to find the people I could work with, the people who bring me joy in life. And I definitely want to work with people that inspire me, and think differently, because there's definitely a lot of potential that is being missed. And when I get the opportunity to talk to you, you make me feel like anything is possible, and that's really exciting to me.
Yeah. I think you make me feel like I'm not alone because I'm so driven towards these creating things that are like completely brand new or like never been done before or really like off the wall to most people. You know, obviously, when I mentioned I'm selling a $10 million photograph to my closest friends and family, like it took them a while to swallow. But for you, you're just like, heck yeah, like that sounds so crazily cool. And you just seem to get it right away. And so um, I do think that like a big part of why we're creating this podcast together is because there are people out there who want to do these massive things, and some of them haven't even started trying at all, and some of them maybe have already accomplished some massive things that they never thought were possible. And it can feel really lonely sometimes to be somebody like that. Like you mentioned, I'm pretty much the only one on your Facebook who's trying to do something at this scale.
I definitely felt like I gotta watch this, but not just watch it. I wanted to be part of it, because I found that if I work with other people and help them on their projects, it can actually help me on my own. And as we've been working together, I feel like my projects have had so much momentum simply because I helped you on this little journey. Because I'm learning with you.
Do you have an example of like of that?
Um, okay, so when you started with your stuff, and there's a little teaser for the next section, you had to have a foundation in order to receive the $10 million, right? And for me, I was like, hey, if I want to achieve my goals, I kind of have to do the foundational work for mine too, because how can I achieve these goals if I don't have the preparation done? And watching you do some of the planning for your event to make it a reality really inspired me too, because there's so much learning from the start of something to actually the creation of it.
Yeah. The what I've learned creating things is that every time I take a step towards creating something, I bump into an obstacle. And you know, whether it's, oh, I can't afford to buy this product I need, like a camera to start, you know, to start my photography business, or you know, that would have been like years ago, but like, or something as simple as like, oh, like I put out this invitation to an event and nobody's coming, so like, how do you actually make an event that people want to come to? Like, or how do you communicate with people so that they actually receive the message? Because social media like doesn't necessarily you know, actually like dependably share a message with others. Or, you know, somebody says, oh, like what you're offering is too expensive, and it could literally be $10. And like, so it's like, is it that it's too expensive, or is it that it doesn't actually resonate with the other person? Like, there's so many tiny little obstacles. And then when you are successful, it's like, oh, how do you manage all of the different projects you're working on? How do you manage the different parts of the business, the sales, the marketing, the actual operations, the product development, the keeping it going, then also your family life and your community life. How do you manage all that stuff? There's just, no matter what stage I get to in creating and bringing new things into the world, I realize that there's always going to be a next obstacle or a next thing that's getting in the way. And that process is never ending. And it's the process that I love, because in that process, I'm growing and I'm experiencing healing. And I'm also just like finding myself living in a more enriched life as well.
You've also challenged me to think differently around even just money and what money can provide, and switching some of the old scripts I have around it, fighting for what I'm worth, inspiring me to ask for what I'm worth. And I don't know, I think just the fact that you wanted to use this money for something really cool too. I think that was the other thing that really drew me in. I think your goals really could shift how people think about art, how people think about money, how people think about themselves and their community. It's beautiful.
After the break, we will reveal why I am selling a $10 million photograph and a little bit more about what the photograph is. During this first season of WOMMcast, what we're going to be doing on the breaks is featuring local musicians and performers. And the first local musician that we're featuring is Alex MC. Alex MC is a singer-songwriter from Scarborough, Ontario. She just released her debut album titled, Is Wanting You the Worst Thing I Can Do? Written in the aftermath of the pandemic and personal heartbreak, these love songs are a mix of mellow acoustic singer-songwriter and upbeat alt country, featuring powerful vocals and poetic, raw lyrics. Here's Alex MC's song, Please Don't Touch.
Damn near 5 holes in the wall, and that's not all. Slept almost till noon, and I snuck out too soon. And I was never good enough to make it. I say to myself, straighten out the couch pillows. Please don't touch. You're coming at me with concern, and you're carrying burns. Don't you know I'm like a cat alone, and I like it like that. And I was never strong enough to take it, and I blame myself, straighten out my strung out body. Please don't touch. It's been rough, and it's been rough, and I don't think I'll ever get my rough edges right. Please don't touch. Please don't touch. And I was never calm enough to wait it out, and I'm laying myself on broken altars now for good luck. Please don't touch. Please
Welcome back. So we just talked about why the two of us have been curious about working together. We both have huge, unreasonably large goals that we're driven and committed to bringing into this world. And ultimately, we want to create art. Would you say that that's something that you like to do, Sarah?
I've been an artist since I was old enough to pick up a pencil. And I definitely want to do a lot in this world that is extremely ambitious. And as long as I've known you, you are also extremely ambitious. So, yes.
Yeah. When I was in grade 6, I auditioned for like an arts-based school that you had to actually audition based to get into. It was called Baythorn Elementary in Thornhill, Ontario, Canada. And ultimately, I got into the school, and I was really excited because I didn't feel like I fit in the school where I was going before. In fact, looking back, I was quite bullied. And I definitely resonated more with artists. And I wasn't able to quite put my finger on that at that age, but like I was raised with classical music, and I was raised with going to the theater from a young age. I was very lucky and privileged to have those experiences like regularly. And so I was constantly singing and dancing, like, and performing for my mom when I was growing up. And I was also in community theater, and that continued and continued until around grade 11 or 12, when I had to start making real life decisions. And I was, at that point, I was doing community theater and theater class, drama class in high school. It was like 15 hours a week. Okay. And that's a lot of theater.
Yeah,
and
it
it's
is.
because that's what I loved to do. But that was the age when I had to decide, was I going to keep doing it, or was I going to study something else? And ultimately, I decided that I wouldn't keep doing it. And the reason I made that decision was because I decided that I wasn't good enough. And looking back now, I realize that for somebody who is like 15, 16 years old to decide whether they're good enough at a craft in order to pursue it, like, even though they love it so much that they're doing it 15 hours a week, like for years and years, it's kind of sick and disturbing, really, for a 15-year-old, 16-year-old to decide that they're not good enough. And what I now know is it had nothing to do with how good I was. It was 100% about how reasonable of a decision it was to be an actor, especially a theater actor in society. And ultimately, what I was taught by the people in my life, even the ones that encouraged me to go to all of these extracurriculars and these schools, was that it wasn't a reasonable decision. And I think that that is ridiculous.
Well, I think it's really awesome, one, that you had all those experiences, because that really laid the foundation, I think, for what makes you have such passion and kind of an authority around what art is, in today's society. But I think it also, to me, it's a little sad that you squashed your own dreams at such a young age, but I don't think it ever stopped you at the root of who you are. I think I've seen many forms of art come from the time that I've known you, whether it's creating poetry for a stranger with your typewriter, or going out there and even providing space for artists to co-create together and share what they've made. And so I think it's really cool that you had those experiences, but sad that you felt like you had to prove yourself at such a young age.
Well, what do you think? Do you think that it's a completely reasonable decision for somebody to commit to being a theater actor in our society?
I how many people watch Netflix? How many people watch all these different movies? Like, we consume art on a daily basis. We listen to music while we go on a walk with our headphones. We are surrounded by art all the time. And I think to have that as something, you know, a lot of people aspire to be like actors in general. And like, I didn't get to participate in theater in high school. And that actually really made me sad. You know, and when it came to music, I was playing clarinet, and my older sister, she's like, "You're not really good." And it really made me stop trying to play any music for a long time. And then I was like, later in my life, I was like, you know what? I'm a grown ass person and I can decide if I want to play an instrument or not.
This story is so relevant to this whole thing where you said, I'm not really, your sister said you're not really good at something that you were trying. Like, we don't start off good at stuff, and because people can't handle us being in a learning process, they stop us entirely from doing it. And
It
that's the
squashed my
same
dream
thing.
entirely. I didn't want to try anymore.
Well, this is the thing that I was saying about theater acting is like, I had to decide whether I was good enough to do this at such a young age. And I don't think it has anything to do with being good enough. It has more to do with what we're valuing in society.
Yeah. It's got to be for money. Like, are you good enough to make money off of this? I feel like is the biggest thing, instead of just allowing people to have that creative space to start learning. I mean, a lot of my beginning of learning how to draw was from other artists and trying to copy essentially how their techniques worked, you know, even if it was just practicing. But you can't sell that stuff anyway. A lot of it's copyright, but you still need to learn. You still need that process. And I feel like there's a lot of squashing of that.
Yeah. And so I know a lot of people. I'm sorry to hear that you didn't have more artistic opportunities in school. And I think that that has a lot to do with people like me at 15 deciding that they're not good enough to pursue it. And so there's less people who are there's less people who are fighting for it, less people who are actually teaching it well, and there's just less artists who are working and like fostering more arts. I think it's a cycle, and I'm concerned genuinely that we could arrive at the 22nd century and there be no artists at all because of that mentality of stopping people when they're new at it because they're not good enough at it. And even a lot of the people who I know who ended up continuing to study theater in post-secondary and spending a shit ton of money there, they still ended up dropping off after school because they realized that in order, maybe they can get a job, but like the amount a theater actor or even somebody who's in a show makes isn't stable and regular, and you have to end up doing other things, and then maybe you're not, and those other things aren't necessarily teaching because the teaching roles are super underpaid, and like the arts just generally don't have the cash flow. And so that's kind of where the premise of the $10 million photo comes from. It's like, what if an artist could just create one piece that sustains them or jumpstarts their career because if you look at a lot of the successful artists' lives that we look up to, it's usually one major piece. And ultimately, what if you just go in with that intention of having that one piece, or looking at your whole repertoire and saying, which of my pieces is the most valuable? Because I've always thought of this photograph to me being like unsellable. I just love it so much. And so I'm like, well, if I did sell it, what would I sell it for? And I decided, how much money would I need to never have to worry about money again? And I thought $10 million. And I was like, okay, well then all I have to do is get one person to buy my piece for $10 million. And then I could focus on creating all my artistic projects in this world, fostering young artists, developing new artistic curriculum, and building a media company that I dream of. And I don't have to worry about the money part. And obviously, it's more complicated than that. If you want to build bigger things, you need ongoing cash flow. But it gives me the time and space to get all that stuff off the ground. And so that's really where the idea came from.
There's this quote by, I think it's Ralph Waldo Emerson: every artist started as an amateur. And, you know, I used to do this art in the park class for people where I just gave free art lessons, and people would be like, I'm not an artist. And I turned to them and I'd be like, can you throw paint at a canvas? Yeah, then you're an artist, right? And so it's a limiting belief, but like, if you release that and you start trying, and especially if you have the space to try because your financial needs are met, then you can actually create something, and you can invest in the supplies that could help fund that art, whatever style it is, whether it's, taking classes or it's going to workshops, I don't know, even if you want to be an extra in a film, you have to have your needs met still. And maybe these things aren't paying enough. And so if you do have the chance to sell something that does matter to you, it's priceless to you, for something that funds and jumpstarts that, what a powerful transfer of energy, if you will, into the person you can become.
Yeah, and obviously there's so much here. Like, ultimately, the whole goal has become to artify life and to rethink art, because ultimately art is something that, as you said, lives in all of us and improves all of our health, which, is diminishing by the day, and the health of our planet. Because if we're focused on creating and bringing new things into this world and being together and devising new work, then maybe we're less focused on just buying things and constantly feeling unfulfilled and not being connected to our community and not being connected to our workplace and other humans, and feeling envy and jealousy and maybe, I see the rabbit hole as truly being the possibility that could shift our entire timeline of where humanity's headed. And I really do feel like art and reimagining the role of art is the catalyst.
it's definitely the catalyst. You know, and imagine just like being able to have the time and space to customize some of the stuff you own currently with art, you know, and making it your own. I did that with a lot of paint pens, you know. And just because I was surrounded by something that was unique and it was mine, and you know, it just added so much value to my life. And when I took that time, these objects, you know, it helped me with minimalism. So I wasn't overly like surrounded by abundance that was unnecessary, you know. And it allows you to have time and space to even add value to other people's lives. Maybe you are creating something for another person because you actually have the time to. And be mindful of that. And maybe trying to put together a little package might cost you, you know, some money, but you have that opportunity to bring joy to somebody else's life, and the process of making it might be healing for you. uh, and maybe you're putting energy into it. But if it's for money, like I've had commissioned work that causes the most anxiety I've ever felt, you know, because it's around money and not really releasing and empowering me. Um, and I think more people should have the opportunity. You know, we don't need to be Van Gogh, pour all his life, and then like now that he's dead, everybody's monetizing him. You know, like why can't we experience more while we're alive?
Yeah. So I think we've made it clear that it's not about the photo itself, even if the photo is amazing. And ultimately, I don't think it ever is about the piece of art itself. No piece of art is really about the piece of art. It's about everything around it. It's about the context of it. And so when I decided that I'm going to sell this piece of art for $10 million, the first thing I did was I decided I need to have a rebirthing ceremony. I'm not somebody. I was Philip. And Philip wasn't somebody at that point who could sell a photo for $10 million. I would have to rebirth into somebody who is able to do that. And so what I did is I had a public rebirthing ceremony in January in the freezing cold where I invited a bunch of different artists, this wonderful musician, Alex McCullough, to perform, and Carrie Schaefer to lead some body work and meditation with the group. And there were a few other artists. Micah Edwards performed this unbelievable storytelling piece about his Jamaican mother. And ultimately, the whole purpose of that ceremony, at the end of it, I told the story of how I wrote dark poetry as a child and I never shared it with anybody after having an experience of sharing it. And the person who I was sharing it with was looking at me in shock because they thought I was deeply disturbed and I was really just expressing. I was being an artist and a poet. And so I thought, okay, well, I can't share this. It needs to be private. And I just held in my artistic spirit more and more. And I became really sick and depressed in my 20s because I was just holding in so much pain and trauma of not being able to share what is really happening for me. And my art, like my art, not just me playing characters in theater, but me being me and me being vulnerable and me actually sharing what is flowing through me. And so in this rebirthing ceremony, I gave up that entire act and decided that I'm willing to share. And that's the kind of person who is capable of selling a $10 million photograph, I believe, is the kind of person who's willing to fully be seen and to share vulnerably and to be willing to walk into the fire again and again, because there's going to be a lot of scrutiny when you put yourself out there, and that's what's happened. And again, it's so much about the process of who you become and who I'm becoming by taking this mission. And WOMMcast this season is going to be about sharing and learning in real time all of this process so that everybody who's listening can learn these lessons together. And I do want to tease the photograph because I created a voice recording about the photograph at the beginning of the year, and I think I'm going to play it for you right now if you want to hear it, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Let me find it.
You talking about art being vulnerable is so true, though, because you're really trying to connect with something within yourself and then to put it out there into the world for judgments. Like, if you're afraid of judgment, you might not take that leap of faith, you know, but you just got to do it. Might as well, right? Otherwise, it might hurt your soul if you don't.
You ready for this?
Yes.
So for me, one of my favorite feelings in the world is the feeling. It's the feeling of walking around the city at nighttime, right after it rained. You see the mist and the street lights. The road is reflecting the light a little bit. So everything is just a little bit more alive. And I especially like, there's not too many people around. You're walking through the city, and it feels like the city is all mine. Like I created it. Like it exists just for me. And the only way to elevate that experience is when I notice a moment, like a couple of people, a couple walking home, carrying a bag. I don't know what's in it, but I know that they're probably going to have some late night snacks and relax on the couch and just be together. And these moments, they coat my body with warmth, and they remind me that beauty and romance is all around me in every single moment of life. And not just that, if I happen to have my camera in that moment, like I did in this moment, I can create together with them something that will last forever without them even knowing, preserving that moment in their life and in mine. And having the opportunity to relive it, even as buildings are torn down and new ones are built, and life continues to move on and on. For me, to be a part of all that, it's the reason I live for.
Wow. I don't think I've ever heard that little clip. I love it.
No, that clip is created. It was created to be shared at the purchasing event for the photograph, because I thought I would be able to sell the photograph in 3 months. Turns out a little bit bigger of a goal than the timeline allowed for. But I definitely set up a lot of the pieces during those 3 months when I first declared that I was going to be selling the photograph. And one of the biggest pieces I laid out was I actually had to create a mechanism to make a sale. So I created a company, and the company is called WOMM. And after the break, I'm going to share about the vision of WOMM. Here's Alex MC with another hauntingly beautiful song called We Can Never Be Friends.
I sit watching butterfly wings and listen to the thing that sings and wonder what the flowers bring. And I wish you well, I wish you well. Filling up my lungs now with dust and bones and plastic shells. The pounding of the drum still felt. And I wish you health, I wish you health. But I know we can't go back when. I know we can never be friends. I remember when we were running scared, sniffing dreams and smoking nightmares. Did you believe me when I said I don't care? Well, I wish you wealth, I wish you wealth. But I know we can't go back when. And I know we can never be friends. I know like a cloud. You're impenetrable, and I've let you down. My thoughts are sillier than clowns, and I wish you felt love for me. And I know we can't go back when. And I know we can never be friends. I know we can't go back when. And I know we can never be friends.
All right, welcome back. So, before the break, I shared this epic clip about the $10 million photograph and my mindset when I created that photograph and what I see when I look at it and the power that it holds. And now we're going to round up the episode by talking about the organization, the company that I started to give myself a container to actually make this sale, because it's not very reasonable to make a sale of $10 million without a company and business around it. And so the journey I've been on this last year has been developing the entire premise of this company. And Sarah, you've been a big part of that creation process, and there's been over 40 artists who've been a part of that creation process up until this point. And I'd love to hear what your perspective of that creation process has been like.
It's been a lot of learning. And I feel like there's been a lot of pivoting from like recognizing realistic timelines and also how to coordinate people, because when you decide to work along other words, sentences, meaning when you decide to work alongside other people, you get this opportunity to learn other people's personalities. You learn what matters to them, and even how to guide the process of making something a reality. And I've been inspired the whole journey, truly. Even though, we've had some moments where it's like, oh, do we like the way we're going? Do we need to learn new things because, do we understand project management? And where can we start in order to achieve these dreams that would really make an impact to a whole community? And what is necessarily important along that journey. And man, there's like, do we take notes? Do we record things? Do we have meetings? Do we onboard additional people? It's been a lot. But as I learned from you in this process, I'm able to apply these things to my own life and, create some of my own projects growth because of what we've been doing here together. And so I'm really excited that we have the opportunity to share this with our audience, because, making your dreams a reality is possible. It might have to be one small step at a time, but if anything, WOMM has proven to me that a lot can be made real by simply coming together with a dream and taking that step.
Yeah. Well, so many of those questions, I feel like, are the exact same questions that anybody has when they're starting any company or small business or organization or collective. And so I was thinking, like, I think what really makes sense for us to do is share this process with people. And that's why we decided that a podcast makes a lot of sense, because, what if we could save other people a little bit of time in their journey of creating something, and also inspire people a little bit so that more people are creating things simultaneously. Because ultimately, what I'm seeing with things like the Great Resignation and with inflation and with climate change and with the current state of political affairs, for most people, it seems work sucks. It's underpaid. There's not enough. There's too much fear and not enough comfort around the future. We're not getting along as much as we want to. We're not feeling healthy in our bodies, and we're feeling concerned about the future. But not just that, like unable to afford the present. So many of us, even those of us who are born in considerable amount of privilege, have a very hard time imagining affording a stable place to live, a family. All of the most basic parts of life seem to be up in the air right now. And so ultimately where we spend most of our time and where we earn most of our money is through work. And so if I'm designing and if we're designing a new workplace, a place where there's value exchange occurring, what would that be? And if we're designing a place where art and media is occurring, given the current state of mainstream media, what would that look like and what would that be? And those big questions have really been there for me ever since I worked at CBC, which is Canada's public broadcaster.
Yeah, I would love you to talk about the work environment you were in and the work environment you want to create, because that's the thing that inspired you to want to make a better work environment and do allow people to consent to what they're doing too, and the workload and giving them opportunities. And yeah, I want to hear more about that journey for you.
There's a lot I could share about CBC and my experience working there. But the biggest thing that I noticed was the contrast of going and studying. I studied at Western University. I did a joint program where I did college television broadcasting, very hands-on, and I did university media and technology studies. And those schools, it was all about getting involved and the student experience and empowering us to come up with ideas and to join clubs and to be a part of the whole thing. And I did all that, and I got really involved, and I was able to grow a lot and learn a lot and feel really enriched. And then I did an internship at CBC, and the internship was really great. Actually, we got to go and work in different departments and meet all people throughout the building and learn kind of what we liked and what we didn't like and what we wanted to do with our careers. And then I was very lucky and privileged after that to get offered a job doing data management for the television news department. And all of a sudden, I was just sitting in a chair. I go out every day with the same few people, just sitting in a chair and not really getting to know anybody, and feeling and talking to a lot of people who had been in that building for a long time and were actually also put in these chairs, not doing what they wanted to be doing because their departments were eliminated over time. Their departments of maybe painting sets or of doing things that were analog that no longer existed, cutting film and doing all sorts of really analog, hands-on, technical skills. And all of a sudden they were just sitting in chairs, kind of counting the days to retirement. And it didn't make any sense to me that in this building that was largely publicly funded, there was no opportunity for me to have much of a say in terms of what was happening and to connect to people across departments and to feel a part of the organization, especially since I was hired for many, many years as a freelancer, not actually as a staff member. And it seemed to be that they were avoiding that under any means necessary to actually hire me or any of my peers as staff, any of the new people in the building, because once you're a staff at a public broadcast, it's really difficult to get rid of you. And so eventually, after being there for a number of years and even taking a year off and going and working at a different television station in Australia, I went to a town hall meeting, and Justin Trudeau had just been elected in Canada. So People were optimistic, a young, fresh face. And he said he was going to have a youth council, Justin Trudeau said, and the government. So I raised my hand at this big town hall of CBC where the head, the president of English Services, was giving this presentation about how great everything was. And I said, hey, like, you know, I noticed that a lot of my peers aren't really resonating with CBC stuff. And there's a lot of isolated people my age who are in the building. And I was wondering if you would create a youth council, some sort of a youth organization in the building for people to have that perspective. And at first she got really defensive. And then eventually she said, okay, well, shoot me an email and let's see. So then I couldn't believe that the head of the organization was asking for me to shoot her an email. I ended up getting an email a couple days later from the head of human resources. It turns out, because I never even gave my name, it turns out she printed out a photo of me from the event and showed it around to all of her staff saying, who is this person? And they didn't know either because, you know, the HR people are off in their own department. And they were showing that photo of me around the building in elevators. And eventually they found somebody who knew who I was. They hooked me up. They told her who I was. She sent me an email, said, hey, I want to meet with you because I want to hear more about what your idea is. And I met with her and the head of digital departments in the building and the entire human resources team, 20, 30 people. I had 7 meetings. We created a bunch of different possible concepts and eventually ending with, let's just create a pizza party for new people in the building to get to know each other. And there were 3 or 4 steps after that in terms of how we could actually create longevity with people getting to know each other and just potentially eventually evolving into something like a youth council. And then I got an email saying it's not a good time for this. And that was the end of it. And simultaneously, my department was being rejigged and I had my manager retired. I had a new manager. She came in and I got a call saying I'm being taken off the schedule. And I said, oh, why? And the person said, well, I'm not exactly sure. This new manager told me to take you off the schedule. And I think it's because you've been working like full-time hours for a certain number of weeks. And that eventually bumps you up into a full-time job. And so they might take you off for a few weeks so that you don't get automatically upgraded to a full-time job. And I later learned from the union that there was even a term for that in the union called freelance laundering. And I got so upset and I was so emotional that I just didn't want to work in that building anymore. And that was the end of my experience working there.
That is quite the journey, and also really crappy that like you're making good strides in the right direction for this organization, and they were worried about money. Essentially, that's what it sounds like, at least. And they squashed your creative spirit, even after how much energy they put into it, to make you feel empowered. And yeah, that's unfortunate that happened, but that inspired you to create WOMM and have a different kind of momentum with how you want to create a future environment. And I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. And so ultimately what I felt was missing at CBC and what I feel is missing in a lot of corporate environments is this spirit of innovation, the spirit of creativity, the spirit of art and of vulnerability without the risk of judgment. And so with WOMM, we've created 5 pillars, and the 5 pillars of WOMM are really the foundation of what I think an organization that does things completely differently would be focused on. And the first pillar of WOMM is to develop business skills for artists. Because if we want more artistry in the world, then we need artists to be able to bring their work to the world and also receive enough to be taken care of, to create that exchange. So business skills for artists. The second piece would be artistry for businesses. So if artists have business skills, then they would have the skills to be able to consult and bring some of their work into businesses and actually make change on a foundational level in the actual workplaces that exist in our society. The third piece would be community building across disciplines. So much of what we're missing in our society is working together, actually working together. And so I would focus first with building community across disciplines just in the arts, because dancers stick with dancers, actors stick with actors, singers stick with singers, improvisers stick with improvisers. And so if the artists were strongly connected across disciplines the same way I wanted it to be at CBC, then they can lead the way, because artists generally create culture, create change, create new ways of doing things. And so creating community across disciplines, and how are we going to do that? It's by co-creating meaningful experiences. So this rebirthing ceremony, through events, through workshops, talks, presentations, and media, will co-create meaningful experiences, just like we're doing right now with this podcast. And the final piece is art as an ecosystem. Right now, we see art as entertainment, art as a one-way street, but life is an ecosystem. Life is an interaction. It's a relationship. You know, the flower doesn't just grow out of the ground. The flower has a relationship with the ground and the sky and the air and the sun. And we ignore all that in the context of our modern society. Everything is connected to everything. We know that that's true now more than ever with COVID, and we need to start acting and behaving that way if we want to mitigate some of the disastrous consequences of climate change. And so those are the 5 pillars of WOMM. And where I imagine WOMM living in the physical world is the place of the $10 million photo where it was taken. It no longer exists. It was taken in an alleyway in Toronto that no longer exists. And they're building a whole new infrastructure there that's meant to be a community space and a space for art to live. And I'd love for WOMM to have a permanent space that reimagines public media, reimagines art, reimagines how we treat artists and how we treat each other in society. And $10 million sale would jumpstart that entire vision.
So what I'm hearing is you're not buying a photograph, you're buying a movement.
Amen, sister.
Yeah, I think when you describe this work culture that you want to create and the vision that you want to artify life, you know, it's so appealing to me, because we do live in an ecosystem where, you know, it's when everything's about the dollar value, you're really missing the point. And sometimes the most beautiful things come from not focusing on, can I sell this? You know, but even if that like co-creation starts small, it doesn't mean it can't grow into something big and more meaningful. I would like to say that you're a visionary because of what you're trying to create here. There's not too many people who are as mindful as you about their work culture that they're trying to create. They want to make money, you know, and you're trying to make a better world, and for each person involved in it. And to have a place where people have that opportunity is, I mean, it's possible to find, but I think it's hard to find. And I'm excited to see where everything goes from here.
All right, so what's coming up on this season of WOMMcast? We're actually going to spend each month unpacking a different question that comes up about how to make a sale like this. So the first month is going to be about how to generate authority as an artist. How do you go from unknown to known? Because right now, the only people who really know what we're up to are the people who know us already. And so how do you generate resonance? How do you break through the noise? And that's what this first month is going to be about. We're going to ask the question, explore possible solutions, and take actions to try to generate some authority as artists with this work. And the best thing you can do is subscribe to this podcast and follow the journey along with us. And I can't wait to be on this journey with you, Sarah.
It's going to be a beautiful ride, that's for sure.